Welcome back to the Jag Bros. It's our first official off-season podcast here in 2025. We're breaking down the crazy moves that have been going on in Jacksonville this week. I am JT Raymond alongside my two brothers. All three of us are co-hosts of the Jag Bros. It has been an emotional week, I'll tell you that. From I think most Jaguar fans were ready to completely give up on the team to a surprise announcement made by the owner, and to the point now we're recording this on Friday, the 24th of January. We have a new coach, new optimism, and an open vacancy at the GM position.
We are so back, baby. You know, we always say, JT, that we are Jags fans in the highs and the lows. Well, we've experienced all of those this week. We've experienced the lowest of lows, like who is ever going to come and be a coach, to the freedom of Baalke being gone, to going out and having secret meetings and going and getting Liam Coen, our 1B, and a great coach to pair alongside Trevor Lawrence in his bright days finally ahead in Jacksonville.
Hope has been restored and pumped into all the Jags fan. It's been really down lately. It was hard to podcast, honestly, getting up and talking about the same problems, the same things going on. Pretty much what I was hoping for at the beginning of hearing Doug Peterson was gone. I was like, hopefully a new coach will come in, be like, I don't want to work with Trent, and this is who I want. And that's exactly pretty much which is what happened. As a lot of people may know, Liam Coen took his name out of the race and was like, I don't want it. Even though it's a promotion, even though it'd be more money than I'm getting, I do not want this because Trent Baalke is there, and it is pretty much set up to fail if he's still there. Gets him fired, and Shad pretty much said, you can run it. You pick who you want. This is the dream job. Any coach would have wanted this job, and it was impossible for Liam Coen to turn it down, and it seems like we have a very awesome offensive-minded coach, and let's see what he can build here.
Yeah, that's exactly where we're going to be spending our time today on the podcast. So if you like our content, please follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasting information. Leave us 5-star reviews to help the algorithm, especially if you like it, or leave us some comments. Other things that you would like us to see done over the offseason are going into 2025. But we're going to spend primarily most of the time talking about the big news with Liam Coen being the new head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously a tumultuous week, as Joey has already mentioned, starting when we hear that Liam Coen has pulled his name out of the ring and he's going to become the highest paid offensive coordinator in the NFL. At that moment, let's put a timestamp there before all the rest unfolds. What's going through your head, guys? How upset were you? And where did you think we were going to end up?
I thought we were done. I mean, we were texting all Wednesday, probably like a lot of Jags fans. And, you know, the next two interviews are Robert Saleh and Patrick Graham, defense coordinator from the Raiders. And neither one of these guys are exciting. We've said, we just did our last episode breaking down all the candidates. We had our highest ranked guys are young, offensive minded. That is where the Jaguars are geared towards. We have our franchise quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. We have a wide receiver 1 in BTJ. We've got a great tight end in Engram. We've got good running backs. Like, that is the future of the Jaguars. And so for Coen to say no, for one, is just embarrassing. And all these reports saying we're shocked, which was frustrating because we said, we've been pounding the table saying, hey, people are going to say no if Baalke's there. He has a history of fighting with other head coaches. It was frustrating and it was hopeless, being like, who in the world are we going to have to go back and get Doug Peterson? Are we going to have to go get a college coach who's unproven at the NFL level, which we've already seen 3-4 years ago with Urban Meyer? It just felt like disaster, no hope. And then Shad Khan makes the aggressive move.
Joey, I'll give you credit because you said there's a chance that Baalke still gets fired. I thought there was 0% chance. We all saw that the clip that Shad mentioned that he would be open to that. I personally thought that was more lip service, and it's possible that it meant to be lip service until you all of a sudden went 0 for 8 on your your top 8 candidates. You saw Ben Johnson accept a more frustrating job up with the Chicago Bears earlier this week, who is, I think, most Jaguars fans' number one, certainly was our number one on this podcast. And then Liam Coen decided to be decide to be a coordinator instead of a head coach. And I think there's a good chance that Saleh and other guys who didn't even have a job currently were willing to say no. They would rather have been unemployed than work with Trent Baalke in the front office there in Jacksonville, because they viewed it as a lame duck situation. And I think that spoke. I think it was a boycott, if you will, of all reasonable NFL head coaching options for Jacksonville for these guys to come if Baalke was still the GM. And I'll give Shad credit too. I've been openly critical for him for now a long time, but I'll give him credit for recognizing his mistakes and going out and changing the situation.
I honestly don't give as much credit to Shad on this one, because I don't think Robert Saleh and Patrick Graham, I don't think really ever had a shot at the head coach job. They're more brought in for DC. This guy would work with Trent Baalke. And so Trent brought them in for a second interview, but it was pretty clear Shad had no want of hiring those people as head coaches. He wanted Ben Johnson or Liam Coen. Ben Johnson left for the Bears, arguably a similar kind of position. You have a promising young quarterback with a lot of weapons and a team that it seems to be ascending, and you kind of have that same thing with Jags. So you're like, it's 50-50 shot. But when, Liam Coen turned it down, I have to give all the credit pretty much to Liam Coen, because he realized that it was a bad position. The Jaguars thought they could force Trent on him. He called their bluffs. He said, no, I don't want this job if Trent's there. And Shad was like, okay, you know what, fine, I don't need him. And that is the only reason Trent Baalke is gone, is because Liam Coen said no. It wasn't because Shad was like, oh, I realized that it's my mistake. It was more, I want Liam Coen more than I want Trent Baalke, so I'll get rid of him and get Liam Coen into the door. So it was all more his move of getting Trent fired than it was Shad realizing he made a mistake.
I agree with you, Joey, on the Baalke move. We've obviously pounded the table that Khan dragged his feet way, probably more than 2 years too long with Baalke. He dragged his feet too long with firing Doug. And he typically has this tendency to be more passive, where the NFL is a hyper-aggressive league. But I do have to give Shad a lot of credit for, once Baalke was gone, once he was fired Wednesday afternoon, what does he do? He starts having secret meetings. He sends out his private jet to go get Coen. And that is the hyper aggressive. That is the win now mentality. Look, it's been beaten to death. It was a very unique situation. Probably the Jags and Coen didn't handle it perfectly. But the reality is, you look at both situations, the Jags did what they needed to do. Coen did what he needed to do to get, you said it, Joey, a dream scenario where not only does he get to be a head coach now, he gets to have the keys to decide, hey, who do I want to be my offensive coordinator? Who do I want to be my defensive coordinator? And have a big voice in who is going to be the GM for the future, which is why we wanted so much it to be a clean house about a month ago, so that a head coach and GM could come in, be together, work together, be on the same page, because we just haven't seen that in Jacksonville in so long. So I do have to finally give Shad some credit, because he was hyper aggressive, made the big move, and we're excited. There is a reason there is Twitter's blowing up, social media is blowing up. There is finally excitement again in Jacksonville, excitement again for the Jags.
And I think it speaks volumes with how upset Tampa Bay fans are to lose Coen. So they recognize the fan base is not always right, sure, but if you have this many people, as well as the organization, feeling betrayed by Coen and being very frustrated that Coen has moved on, that to me is a good sign that that you got a guy that is as coveted as Coen is, because he was going to become the highest paid offensive coordinator anyway. So he's right up there. He was, I think, for most Jaguar fans, option 2, tied with either Monken from Baltimore or Brady or Moore or one of the other guys that we were breaking down.
I just wanted to mention, I don't want to rain on the Jaguars parade. I'm very happy to have Liam Coen, but honestly, I don't know if I liked the move going all in right now after you just fired Trent, because you just became the most coveted position. And it seems like everyone's in a race to get their guy. Liam Coen, we could still, if he had signed with Tampa Bay to stay as a OC, we could still go get him like a week later. We could have opened it up, and I wanted to restart kind of the whole interview, give Joe Brady a harder look, Todd Monken, Cliff Kingsbury will be a awesome kind of name. And you could still go get Liam Coen if after all that you still liked him the most. I don't know if we needed to rush in so quickly. Like, we could have still interviewed everyone and been a little more sure. But I just wanted to say that was a possibility that we could have done. But we've gone out and we've signed them, and so I'm going to rock with them completely now.
The way I view this, I think every Jag fan wanted Ben Johnson, and to me, it's funny because Ben Johnson was in Detroit, and I think there's some similarities to the Aiden Hutchinson and Trayvon Walker situation, where all Jaguars fans wanted Aiden Hutchinson. He felt like a can't miss guy, and I think that's probably what Ben Johnson is. Obviously, we're projecting the future. You can't do that in the NFL, and there's a million other factors that play into that. However, Trayvon Walker's also been very good. Back-to-back 10-plus season sacks, continues to improve. And so he is in a really good spot to be a game wrecker and a major disruptor moving forward for years to come. And so I think that's kind of what it is. Like, hey, maybe we didn't get the guy that seems like the can't miss guy, but we have a guy that's got a very high ceiling and has been in a number of different spots so far and been highly successful on the offensive coordinating side.
What I always said about what the Jaguars needed for a head coach was you needed an offensive mind, you needed a good to great play caller, and you also needed someone with strong leadership. That's why I loved Ben Johnson. I loved him coming from Dan Campbell's coaching tree and bringing leadership, but also an offensive genius. We know for Liam Coen, he is a great offensive play caller. We know he comes from Sean McVay's coaching tree. The big question is going to be leadership. And that is still to be seen. But when Shad ran through these interviews, Joey, every report was that Ben Johnson was 1A for the Jags and 1B was Liam Coen. And so I get your point, but they clearly had Liam Coen as their guy after Ben Johnson was on the table. So if you know that he's your guy, I love that aggressive mindset of do whatever it takes and go get him. Because I think if you waited another week, he would have gone back to Tampa. He would have had conversations with family and say, hey, this is where we're planting. This is where we're at. Because the reality is, as messy as it was, he never signed that contract. And so that is part of the reason how this works in the Jaguars' favor to go get Coen. And I think, and I'll be curious, we may have some Bucs fans listening to this episode, and I'd be really curious their take because I follow Trevor Sikkema, the PFF head draft analyst, and he is a diehard Bucs fan. And he said the whole season, hey, Cohen's going to get head coach offers, and he wanted them to move on from Bowles and keep Liam Coen and make him the head coach. Maybe they were going to do that, maybe not, but Khan didn't even give them the opportunity because he went out, got Coen, gave him the offer, and had him signed within 24 hours.
They couldn't fire
for you older.
He's won a Super Bowl and it's gone back to back their conference championship for themselves and in the playoffs. You can't.
He won a Super Bowl with Tom Brady.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Patriots fired, essentially moved on from Belichick, who is far more successful than the defense than Bowles in Tampa. So they would have no problem doing that.
After they didn't make the playoffs multiple times and Tom Brady had left, that's why they moved on. It wasn't like Bill Belichick was still making the playoffs and. Yes, they weren't as good, but they were still good. They would not have moved on from Bill Belichick. They had.
I don't know. I'm putting it out there. I'm putting it out there for Bucs fans who are listening. Jump on our YouTube channel if you want to move on from Bowles, because I've seen a lot, and say we wanted Coen.
Fans wanted to, but there's no way.
Correct. I agree with you, Joey. Yes. That is a fair statement. It wasn't going to happen, especially not this year and probably not next year. But in the reality is, I think the fans noticed that Coen is the secret sauce to what made the Bucs so successful this year than what they thought Bowles contributed to that. And we'll talk about the philosophy 100%. Here in a second. Joey, fill us in. Where has Coen been? How has he got up to this point now?
Okay, so we'll go in chronological order. So Liam Coen started off playing QB. He played at UMass and had a great college career. Didn't go pro, then moved straight on to be the Brown, the Ivy League QB coach. And then from there went to Rhode Island and then back to Brown. He does that quite a bit where he leaves somewhere, goes somewhere, then comes back. Went to UMass and was the passing coordinator, and then Maine. And then he finally gets to the NFL, and he was under the Rams from 2018 to 2020, where he was the assistant wide receiver coach and then became the quarterback coach under Sean McVay. So got a lot of good lessons there, learned from a lot of different places. And then he became Kentucky's offensive coordinator and QB's coach, goes back to the NFL, Los Angeles Rams offensive coordinator in 2022, and then back to Kentucky in 2023 as the offense coordinator, QB coach, and then was at Tampa Bay this year as the OC. And finally is the Jaguars head coach. So there's no more ladders to climb. He is the head coach, and if he is great, he is here to stay. He's not going anywhere. He's finally climbed the top of the ladder, and he ends in Jacksonville, where I hope all his knowledge can combine to build us a winning organization.
He comes from primarily the Sean McVay school. So for those that know, Sean McVay, obviously very, very well-respected young coach for the Rams, revolutionized the game in some respects. Los Angeles Rams almost always run one of the highest rates, if not the highest rate of pre-snap motion, which is great for quarterbacks. It helps somebody like Trevor, who may struggle to read the field at times, be able to decipher, hey, is this man, is this zone? It forces the defense to show their hand when there is some of that pre-snap motion. He also runs a lot of 11 personnel. So that means you are not likely to see a lot of two tight end sets in Cohen's offense. So we'll talk about some of the ramifications there. And he's always targeted the slot pretty heavily, whether it was at Kentucky with Wan'Dale Robinson, who's been a great slot receiver for the Giants, despite the fact that they don't have a lot of offensive weapons. He has been Godwin was the slot receiver there. And that is the same position that Cooper Kupp plays for the Rams. And so some of his most successful years was when Coen was the offensive coordinator for the Rams alongside McVay. So a lot of interesting things. There's a lot of ramifications, I think, for this Jaguars offense in 2025 that will start to break down as well. But Jack, what are your thoughts on his career and some of the offensive philosophy that he brings?
Yeah, you guys pointed out he's got a bent towards quarterback and a bent towards wide receiver and the offensive side of the ball. And again, that is what Jacksonville has desperately needed the last 2 seasons, but really last 1.5 seasons when everything fell apart kind of midway through the 2023 season and just have struggled to score, struggled to move the ball, struggled to convert on third down. A lot of this is what Coen specialized at. He is an offensive-minded coach and a quarterback friendly coach, and just especially this last year just got so weird, so heated between Doug saying all these weird comments towards Trevor Lawrence in press conferences. Doug obviously had this history struggling, beefing with his quarterbacks in Philadelphia. And now you get a guy that all reports and rumors say Trevor loves. Trevor is excited. You have paid Trevor almost $250 million to be the quarterback for the Jaguars until 2030. So that has me fired up. But you look at the numbers, 2024 in the Bucs OC, that is when Coen was at his best. He took an offense that was pretty much middle of the road. It made them one of the top 5 offenses in the league with honestly not very many changes to personnel. So points per game, they went from 20th to 4th this year. Yards per game, 23rd to 3rd. Yards per play, 20th to 4th. Yards per carry, 32nd last to then 3rd this year. And then EPA per snap, 17th to 4th. And then third down conversions, they were 1st this year. And so you look at the Bucs offense, it was solid, but comparative to the Jaguars, I wouldn't say the talent level is significantly different. And I think Coen is clearly going to make some offensive moves in the offseason to build and to shape his offense. And so all of a sudden we could see a Jaguars that have kind of been floating around 15th to 20th, in some cases lower offensively, all of a sudden potentially becoming a top 5 offense in the league, just like the Bucs had this past year.
Just 2 minutes ago, Liam Coen officially has agreed to terms and has put pen to paper.
Woo,
It is now completely official. Liam Coen is the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll see what the terms are. We've heard that it's going to be Ben Johnson money. So I believe that was what, $13 million a year?
Yes.
Yeah. I've heard some around that 12 number. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's going to be a huge number.
It is. And honestly, one thing that I think is great about Liam Coen coming to the Jaguars over Ben Johnson was, I don't realize this, Ben Johnson was the number one offensive coordinator running under center snaps. And I just don't see Trevor doing well under center. His best is in shotgun, and Liam Coen had one of the most out of shotgun plays as OCs. So I think that's going to fit Trevor Lawrence a lot more than Ben Johnson did with golf under center.
So let's talk about some of his offensive philosophy. We mentioned some of the pre-snap motion. Jacksonville was bottom 4 in the league last year with pre-snap motion. Coen is not as high as McVay is, but he is in the top half of the league. And the other piece of that is EPA, which is such an important metric for offense to see how efficient you are with the plays and what is being called. Jacksonville was bottom 5 in that. And Jack, I think you said they were 3rd or 4th with Tampa last year. Those are things those are those kind of deeper level advanced metrics that tell you actually how good this offense is, given some of the weapons and opportunities. The other two things that'll be interesting, and I want to kick this around too. He's had a ton of success with slot wide receivers. So what do we think that means? Do we think BTJ is going to start lining up in the slot, or do we think that's a reemergence of Christian Kirk? And then the fact that we're most likely going to see a greater uptick in 11 personnel versus 12 personnel. So I doubt we're going to be seeing as many 2 tight end sets. So what do we think that means for Jacksonville's 2025 team too?
I don't think BTJ will be like a dominant or move inside completely. I mean, there may be a few plays where they kind of rotate him, playing him in some different positions than just a number 1 outside wide receiver. But I do see this as more of a reemergence of either Christian Kirk, or could be some great things for Parker Washington, who has slowly emerged, or not slowly, but kind of quickly emerged as a really solid slot wide receiver.
I'm going to be honest. I like Kirk. I rock his jersey number 13 all the time. I am a big fan of Parker Washington as well. He was one of the guys that I picked to hopefully break out in 2024. And unfortunately, our offense was a disaster. But I think wide receiver is going to be an area that the Jags target big time, either in free agency or in the draft, because none of those guys are stopping you from going and getting another big time weapon, probably to your point, JT, in the slot. And so I wouldn't be shocked if the top of the second round, a top 35, top 40 pick goes to one of these high-end slot receivers. And then all of a sudden you look very similar to what the Bucs had when they were healthy, of a big Mike Evans outside receiver, go make big plays, gets touchdowns. And then you also have a guy like Godwin who just converts on third down, moves the field, gets open on these short slants. And so I think Coen is going to lean that direction, whether that's early in the draft or in free agency, because there are some big names there as well in wide receiver. I think the Jaguars are going to target wide receiver again this offseason, because let's be real, the other guy not named too, Gabe Davis, doesn't need to be starting on the field next year.
I actually am higher on Christian Kirk for 2025. Number one, Trevor's always liked him. I think that's a good fit. He's shown now in 2 organizations that he's a very top 10-ish level of slot wide receiver. He might not be at the level of Cooper Kupp, Amon-Ra, or Godwin, but I think he's certainly up there and has that potential to put over 1,000 yards in that. I think he fits the mold perfectly. I don't think that's hey, let's re-sign him long term, but I could certainly see them utilizing his skill set in this year. And to your point, Jack, I think maybe more 3rd round targeting one of the wide receivers and hoping you can strike gold with like a Tank Dell or somebody like that in that 3rd round slot position.
Xavier Restrepo from Miami. If he falls that 3rd round, I'd be very happy.
If you can get Restrepo in the 3rd round, like sign me up. Like that, he's one of my top 3 favorite wide receivers coming out of this draft. I just don't think he's going to fall that low.
A great
He might.
slot guy would be Tez from Oregon.
He's also good. He's a little undersized. Like I love Restrepo. I'll go on record. Like I think he is a guy that's going to be very good in the NFL. But obviously my streak on hating on BTJ. Maybe you guys discard some of my wide receiver takes.
It's going to be interesting whether it's Kirk, and you do have at this point too. I'm just going to bring up one more thing on Kirk. You do now have a question mark for the first time in terms of injury history since he's been out significant amount of time the last 2 seasons, and he is starting to creep up there in age in terms of late 20s. But hey, we've also seen some phenomenal wide receivers dominate in the early 30s, so that's kind of shifted a little bit. Regardless, I think a resurgence of Kirk or some other wide receiver that the Jaguars go get, the Jags are going to want to pass. They're going to want to air it. They're going to want to throw it deep. I love this quote. I just found it in a random press conference, kind of like midway through the Bucs season, just researching, looking up Coen. They asked him some sort of question. He goes, I hate to punt the ball. I hate even kicking field goals. I want to score touchdowns. And it just feels like the Jaguars offense, honestly, since before Press, has just always been so content just to get 3 points on the board. So having a guy that wants to go deep feels like a perfect fit for Brian Thomas Jr. He just got nominated this week for the Pro Bowl in his rookie season. I think he's going to take an even bigger leap, which feels crazy, but he did all that with Mac Jones. Hopefully Coen unlocks a whole new level for Trevor Lawrence. And I think BTJ has a real possibility that you're talking about him in the same category as the other LSU guys of Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And that is one more guy where I'm like, BTJ could be a superstar in Jacksonville. And that has me incredibly fired up.
The other piece too that we talked about is the tight ends. So we saw a decent amount of tight end usage from Doug Peterson. He actually ran 12 personnel, which means 1 running back and 2 tight ends more than most in the NFL. We saw Strange play a decent amount down the stretch. Farrell obviously getting 1 to 2 catches, it felt like, per game. What do we think happens in this tight end possession? There's been rumors that we potentially walk away from Engram, but now that could be completely different considering you have a completely different front office and a different coaching staff and philosophy. What's your perspective and opinion on the tight end position?
I absolutely don't think you walk away from Engram. I still
Agreed.
see him as a blue chip, like top 5 guy who was underutilized. You saw what he can do with that end zone, jumping over 3 people. He has such a vertical threat that was just untapped, and also just dominates the middle. You saw Cade Otton, who's a kind of a below average tight end or a nobody, really thrive under Liam Coen and Baker Mayfield. So I do think that that could end up being huge. I don't know about the whole 2 tight end. What's going to happen with Strange. Definitely think Luke Farrell may not have a position. You're going to keep 2 tight ends, I think, maybe at most.
Man, Cade Otton catching Strange here. I don't think Otton is that bad, but, we've texted before offline, not on the pod, and I said I felt like Engram was going to be gone with Baalke staying. But now with Coen here, with a brand new GM, it doesn't make sense to move on from Engram. There is some financial savings. This draft is very, very good at the tight end position. But I think Engram is going to fit really well with what Coen wants to do, which is air the ball, be aggressive, throw the ball deep. Engram is not a heavy blocking tight end. In some ways, he's almost a slot receiver, kind of like we saw to Brock Bowers for the Raiders this year, breaking all sorts of tight end records and rookie tight end records. So you could see an unlocking of Engram as well. And you may be saying, hey, is everyone on the Jaguars offense going to be unlocked? Well, that's kind of what the Bucs look like, even with Baker Mayfield. I don't have his exact numbers, but I think he was pretty close to 5,000 yards this year passing the ball.
Yeah, Baker had 4,500 yards and 41 touchdowns, which if we could get that out of Trevor, holy cow, that would be a breath of fresh air, especially the touchdown front. Feels like Trevor's stuck in the mid to low 20s for his touchdowns.
Yeah, I really do think that this could be an emergence of Trevor Lawrence and how many touchdowns he could throw, kind of unleashing him in the red zone and fixing the red zone offense as well. I think we got so conservative in the red zone, and got clammy. We shrunk ourselves, and we're so predictable that anyone could stop us. And I don't know that Doug wanted to settle for threes, but I think that's just, it ended up, that was all we were going to get because we were so piss poor in the red zone. And I think that's going to change completely, which is going to be amazing. But the question now will be, now that we have the philosophy of the offense, will we get the Jimmies and Joes to really build out this offense and defense with a new GM now that Trent's gone? Who will Liam Coen be going after? Him and Shad said they're going to be collaborating together.
And I believe Tony Baselli is now involved in this process too. There's just been so much going on with the Jags this week. I don't know that he has an official position. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he has been involved in this process as well.
Yes, he's moved into the front office. They haven't given him a specific title yet or signed him to anything, but he became a full-on advisory for Shad after Trent Baalke was fired. He was in on the interviews with Liam Coen in person and was in the room. So he is now a lot more in the room than just kind of calling up and being like, hey, should we do this? He's now making the decisions. And eventually, I do believe he'll be given some sort of title and contract. The question is, will it be EVP or something else?
When it comes to GM, you're going to want someone who is probably an assistant GM or a senior VP of football operations from an organization that has two things. One, a very good culture, a good team building culture, a good winning culture. And then number two, a guy in a team who has a history of drafting well, because the Jaguars are in a very, very good position draft capital wise. They have a top 5 pick. They have 2 third-round picks. They have 2 fourth-round picks. And they're going to be in a much more strapped salary cap position once Trevor's major contract hits, not this year, but next offseason. So you're going to want someone who's able to crush the draft, bring in young talent. And we've talked about this before. I think the Jags roster as a whole is very much set up in a position where you can go best available player at pretty much any position early except for quarterback. And if that guy is good, if he's a player, if he can contribute, that's going to be a win for the Jags.
And from what I can tell, Liam Coen's a smart guy, right? Spent some time in the Ivy League, and so maybe there's a little bit of a jump there, but he's a quarterback, and he's associated with the Rams organization. He's been associated with organizations that know what they're doing from a talent and player personnel perspective. You see the Rams continually reload, even though they've lost some key players within their organization through the years. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get somebody associated with that. The Bucs have a decent front office too, with how they've run it through the years, as well as like obviously attracting Tom Brady a couple years ago. So I trust that Liam Coen is going to be making some good decisions. And at this point, anybody's better than Baalke, it feels like. So let's make a right decision here.
Bye Baalke. Freedom and Jags. It's got me more excited for this 2025 draft, which is right at around 3 months away. And we'll obviously get more into the draft here on the podcast in the coming months, but we're definitely going to be dropping some extra draft content on our YouTube channel just because finally we don't have Trent Baalke, Mr. I want to go get a 4th round guy in the middle of the 2nd round.
Exactly. Yep. And there's some great names out there. I like Agnew from the Detroit Lions. Newmark ended up not getting the position as the GM for the Jets, so he's still available. There's some really interesting names that can really lead this organization and pick some great talent, I believe.
And let's not forget the DC is going to be important too. It's clear,
very important,
that he's going to want to find a head coach, if you will, of the defense. I would not hate Robert Saleh at defense. You look at what the Jets did. Oh, is he? Oh, man. Well, yeah, I see why. I guess I had a good eye there, because you see what the Jets did with and without him defensively this year, and just how much they fell off a cliff. And then you even look at somebody like the Commanders this year. I respect Dan Quinn a ton in his defensive skill, and then look, they have almost no talent on that roster, and they're devising some masterful game plans that are challenging against some of the better offensive coordinators in the league. I hope we can land a good, solid defensive coordinator coordinator that has either head coaching experience or the ability to become a head coach one day himself, in order to really focus on that side of the ball too.
The good thing is, similar to Baalke, with Ryan Nielsen's defense, it feels like anyone is going to be at least a minor upgrade, but hopefully a major upgrade for the Jags defense.
I would say most likely it's going to be Patrick Graham. The way we've already interviewed him twice. His contract ended with the Raiders, so he's practically a free agent. You don't show that much interest. I say they probably give him DC and maybe assistant head coach if that's what he, so desires. And so that way they can split running it. I'm not huge on the guy. He hasn't had that much success, but a lot of people had a lot of great things to say about him, that he sleeps football, knows everything about it, but his record is not great. His defense is usually in the middle of the pack, but that is better than what we've had.
We'll see what Coen wants. All of a sudden, everything kind of changes and shifts because Coen is going to have he will have the most powerful football voice now in the Jaguars organization, especially with Shad cutting that huge check and going all chips in to go get him. So if he likes Graham, I totally agree. We've obviously already interviewed him twice, but if he doesn't, Coen definitely seems like the guy that he wants to make big moves. So he may have another DC in mind, and he's going to have a lot of say in this process.
It's going to be fun. We have optimism again. Oh, it just feels so good. I was ready to jump off a cliff after what we saw in the middle of this week. And I was like,
Save
man,
JT.
how unserious of an organization are we? Maybe we should have recorded on Wednesday afternoon just to get a really good rant there for a second.
We almost did.
Yeah, exactly. We ran out of time.
And then the rumors kept coming.
Yes. And so now it just like, hey, here comes our Super Bowl run. Here comes a chance to reclaim the AFC South. Here's a chance for us to go be what the Lions have been over the last couple of years. Let's go put together something special in Jacksonville.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when Liam Coen took his name out, it very much felt like, and everyone was saying the Jaguars will Jaguar. We'll pick the bottom of the barrel of possible coaches and just be mediocre once again. He'll be fired in 2 to 3 years, and it was going to be terrible. I mean, there was so little hope. If it was Patrick Graham, I was ready to quit the podcast because he's just not a head coach. And then Saleh's just not exciting whatsoever. Yes, he's a great defensive mind, but we don't have defensive talent like that. And everything's geared towards the offense. And say Saleh does do well and picks a good OC, that means that OC will be gone in a year and will be what the Lions are and what the Tampa Bay Bucs are, where they're constantly having to change their stuff. So I am just super happy that was neither one of those guys, and we got a young offensive guy who seems like he is super bright and is going to make the right moves to get us high-scoring games and to the playoffs, possibly more.
There you go. Liam Coen save JT and save the Jag Bros podcast.
And save Jacksonville from another year of Baalke.
For real. Especially with a new stadium on the way. I mean, things are finally bright again in Jacksonville.
Just imagine Trevor Lawrence throwing for 40 touchdowns in a brand new $2 billion stadium, and everyone in Jacksonville is so excited. We're going to the playoffs constantly with the chance to host and win a Super Bowl. The future looks so bright. Everything is sunny skies once again. We make our own future, and it seems like we're going down the right path. We don't have roadblocks and tripping over ourselves and letting the gun shoot us in the foot. It very much seems that everything's in the right path. Hopefully we can keep it going with great new GM hires and OC and DC hires and draft. We will continue to keep everyone updated with new information. And until then, we will sign off with a big, hearty